This is the Long Island Retro Gaming Podcast.
Hi, this is Joel. This was our first live LIRG podcast, and because it was the first go-around, I forgot to hit record within the first minute or so of streaming. So we're going to start off a little fragmented here. The question I had asked George was, what is an FPGA chip, or what does FPGA do? And the podcast starts with him answering that question. The rest is full and complete. Enjoy.
Any kind of electronic device, like normally, when you look at like a motherboard, you think, okay, all of those elements are fixed, like they were designed in a lab, they're fabricated, and they don't change. They're just designed a certain way. A field programmable gate array is a chip that can be configured and physically rearranged differently depending on the manner in which it is programmed. So if you look at any kind of circuit, there are it uses basically logic statements. Any kind of a digital circuit uses logic statements like ands and ors and not and not or, all this kind of stuff that you and I learned in like 9th grade math. And so with an FPGA, you can kind of change things around. You can shift them around to your liking. And so that's as simple as I can explain it for now. But yeah, I'll let you kind of go from there.
Because I'm an idiot, so I'm somebody who doesn't know anything. So this is how I've always kind of understood it. And tell me if I'm right in this. So
yeah.
So an FPGA lets you. It's a programmable thing, but you can program it to act like other computer chips. So instead of say like having a software emulator in Windows, where that's kind of, I think, trying to brute force the software into acting like an old NES system, you can actually tell this FPGA, okay, hey FPGA, check this out. These were all the chips that were in the NES. This is how they were arranged. And then it acts, for all intents and purposes, like it's an actual NES, because the chips are being represented in just like they were there physically. Is that?
Yeah, so that's a good way to think about it. So when you take an FPGA and try to understand it in the context of retro gaming, that's basically how it works. So the way that an FPGA operates is you take the circuit board for a Nintendo or a TurboGrafx-16, or you name the console basically, and it's made up of a whole bunch of connections between components, traces, and then chips, and then things like capacitors and transistors and what have you. And so the FPGA tries to recreate all of that as accurately as possible, and then it operates all of those things in parallel. And this is totally different from software emulation that you and I and others came to get to know like in the late 90s, where those things don't operate in a hardware accurate manner, and they operate sequentially. So like if you're trying to say emulate a Super Nintendo, you have your CPU, you've got your graphics chip, you've got other components on there as well. And so instead of running those processes in parallel like a real Super Nintendo, it basically runs them serially very quickly. And there are certain things like RAM, for example, which it can just completely ignore and disregard. The end result is you'll get Super Nintendo games playing on your computer, but they're not going to play with the same kind of timing and with the same kind of accuracy as a real Super Nintendo.
And that's where a lot of the like audio glitches, graphical glitches, and there's probably way more glitching and odd behavior than we even know about if you just did like a cursory glance at it.
Right.
So something that I learned when kind of researching for this podcast, which I thought was super cool. So as we're talking about, like, okay, for the FPGA, they take these chips and they map them or program them into the FPGA. So it turns out that there's a standard for that that lets you let's just say someone took the graphics processor from the NES, and they map it out, they program it into this language standard, and there's two standards, Verilog and VHDL. They can then, using that, somebody could take that exact, schematic, for lack of a better word, and send that to a factory and get a chip made. Like, it's the language of actually making the chips as well as knowing how they work. So that also means that when somebody does something, when somebody FPGAs a system, they're also kind of preserving they're preserving the hardware without physically preserving the hardware. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, that's a pretty fair thing to say. I mean, it also depends on how accurately you capture the behavior of these chips. So one thing that some people do is what's referred to as decapping a chip. So when you look at these chips on a board, they're cased in epoxy or ceramic or plastic or something like that as a protective measure, so that the internal transistors don't get damaged, right? But that also obscures how everything is connected. And so what some people have learned how to do is either with lasers or with certain types of acid baths, you can remove all of that protective coating without harming the network of transistors that are inside of the chips. And then you can take photographs of that with an electron microscope and then perfectly recreate that in Verilog or in Verilog HDL. And so once you've done that, you've made a one-to-one copy of the chip. There are more indirect ways of making a replica of a chip, though, and those are not going to be perfectly accurate, but they're going to be accurate to some very high degree. But either way, you're right. The Verilog HDL is a language that can be used to manufacture real hardware. And so there's this guy in France, his name is Furtek, and he's done this with Neo Geo. He's done this outstanding work where he, for those who don't know, Neo Geo MVS and AES hardware has a whole bunch of custom chips, and some of them are very prone to failure over time. And so this guy actually wasn't involved in MISTer or any of this stuff. He was just looking to make replacements for these chips because when they die, those MVS boards are trash. There's nothing you can do. And so he perfected the decapping method and captured these nice electron microscope photographs of chips and used it to recreate real chips, and then realized later on this can be applied to MISTer as well, so that people can create a hardware accurate rendition of the Neo Geo in MISTer. And so his code, his VHDL for those chips can totally be used and has been used to make replacement chips.
Well, that's a perfect example of preserving the hardware and then laying it into something that you didn't intend to. So some people might be asking, well, how come, if FPGA is so cool, how come I've never heard of it? Well, if you haven't heard of it, maybe you have heard of it. There is a company called Analog who has been making consoles for quite a few years now. The two most recent ones were the Super NT and the Mega SG, which are a Super NES and Genesis console respectively. And they are FPGA consoles that, same type of deal. They are programmed, there's an FPGA inside of them that are programmed to act like a hardware accurate SNES and Genesis. There is also a company called Terra Onion who recently came out with something that's super cool, which is the Mega SD, right? Having one company make something called the Mega SG and another one called the Mega SD
is really annoying
because you never know what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah.
But the Mega SD is it's not only a flash card, which almost every flash card is an FPGA. Is that?
Yeah, I was going to tell you that. Yeah, if you're familiar with flash cartridges like Crix's EverDrives or the Power Pack or a whole manner of them, most of them do contain FPGAs that are doing different things. Like, you and I so far have been talking about using FPGAs to replicate entire consoles, but you can use FPGAs to replicate the behavior of cartridges or also disk drives as well. So like the optical disk emulators for Sega Saturn or Dreamcast or the Turbo CD, those are all FPGA based too. So people in the retro gaming community have been interacting with FPGAs for a number of years now, but maybe they just don't know that that's how these things work. That's the hardware underlying
Right.
these awesome
So
devices.
the big thing about the Terra Onion deal is that it's a flash cart, and there are Genesis flash carts out there already, but they were, I think, the first company to make a Sega CD FPGA compatible flash card. So it's an optical drive emulator. So you're able to, for the first time, without having the very small Sega CDs, which are probably about this big, right?
Right.
If they even work. So you
Yeah.
could just, you don't even need that. You plug, you plug this cartridge into the Genesis, and you can load your Sega CD disk images, and I mean that from a preservation perspective was huge, because you can, you're playing on original hardware, and you don't have to deal with disk failures, discs that are rotted away.
Yeah, disk rot, laser failure, and all these like movable parts that just go bad with any kind of CD-based system. Yeah.
So that's what an FPGA is. So now we talk about MISTer. Okay. Well, now we know what a FPGA does. What is MISTer, and where does it come in? Now, MISTer is an open source. I believe the goal of MISTer is, as they say it, and don't quote me on this because I don't have it up in front of me, is to make an open source retro gaming console. Right, that is like their mission statement, their goal.
Right.
So the MISTer uses. Well, let's start. We're getting ahead of ourselves. So MISTer is I don't know if it's a sequel or if it's a later iteration of something that's called MIST, MIST.
It is,
and
yeah.
George, you can take that.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, MISTer is basically an extension of an earlier project called MIST, and MIST started as this multi-console, multi-computer FPGA-based platform, and it used a simpler, I think, more it basically used a simpler FPGA development board. And what ended up happening, just as you might imagine, as technology progresses, FPGAs become larger. They have larger logic elements, more logic elements to play with, and they become cheaper as a function of time too. So I think only about a year or two ago, this FPGA development board called the Thoracic DE10 Nano was developed. And the guys who were involved in the MIST project, most specifically this guy named Sorglig, looked at this Thoracic DE10 Nano, and they said, this would better suit our needs. This is a far more powerful FPGA board, which means that you can make larger, more complex cores and run them on this device. So the beautiful thing about FPGA and using Verilog HDL to create these cores for systems is that if you develop stuff on one FPGA device and you want to move it over to another one, it's really not that big of a deal. Like porting the code over is a lot simpler. It's not like you have to completely reinvent the wheel. And so they started with this MIST project and then moved over to what's now called MISTer with this new Thoracic DE10 Nano board.
Well, that's cool. And I mean, in case somebody, we're doing a lot of gobbledygook technical speak here, so in case people don't really realize this yet, so an FPGA, especially something like MISTer, George mentioned cores. So when somebody makes a system, for MISTer, let's say there's an NES core and there's a Genesis core, the core basically reconfigures the FPGA to act like a Genesis,
like a Nintendo or a Genesis,
right? On the fly. You hit a button, it loads the core, boop, 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 2 seconds, boom. And
yep.
I mean, so think about that. Think about what that means from an entertainment aspect. Holy moly! So they made the move to MISTer, and so let's talk about what it is. Let's show people. Like by this point, people are like, what? They keep talking about this.
What the heck
is this thing, right? So
right.
I'm going to do a camera switcheroo here. So this is the MISTer sandwich. There are 3 boards here. The Thoracic DE10 Nano board that George spoke about is in the middle here. So let's see what this thing's got. So on the DE10 Nano, we have a power port. an HDMI. There's a mini USB. I don't really know what that's for. Do you know what that's for?
No, I'm not sure. But for MISTer,
it's not used.
Isn't really used. Yeah, it's just it can be used for other purposes, I guess.
This is a port connector for the top board, and we have an Ethernet port. We have another. Look at that! We got another mini USB.
Mini USB. Yeah.
And then this is actually a micro USB port. This is a bridge that's connecting the bottom hub to this.
Yeah, the bottom is just a USB hub.
So now this top. So okay, what do you need to get started with the MISTer? You really just need the middle board. Can you do everything with the middle board? No, that's where the other stuff comes in. So, okay, well, what does this top board do for us? We get these neat little buttons, right? Which I think these are just menu buttons, George?
That's right. So one brings up the on-screen menu. The other one lets you reset. I think the third one I think it gives you a secondary set of options, but you can do all of this with your controller. So honestly, I don't use these, but they're there on the system. If you
I haven't. I've spent a fair amount of time with this lately, and I have not used these at all. You get a secondary. Yeah. I'm sorry. One thing we did miss on the DE10, there's a micro SD slot right here. So with the I/O board, you get a secondary slot, which I don't really think is super necessary.
It's only used by some of the computer cores.
Okay.
Yeah. But not necessary, really.
So you have an analog video out. Now, one of the beautiful things about MISTer is you can output digital video from the HDMI and analog video to component, composite, RGB simultaneously, and there's no lag. There is no lag. This is a standard audio out port.
Right.
You have a USB port. Now, this guy right here. This is a RAM expansion module. It only comes with There's
two versions. There's 32 gigs and 128, and that's the 128.
Okay, yeah. So we got the 128 to run things like Neo Geo. And I think a couple of the other cores, you need expanded RAM.
Yeah.
And on the bottom here, we just have a standard USB hub. It was made to work with this, obviously.
In reality, you can use any hub, but the nice thing about this one is just its form factor and convenience.
Right. Now, I do have a case, which I have not put on this yet, for reasons that we're going to get into a little bit later on. I have a different USB hub coming that is that works a little bit differently. But okay, so this is the MISTer. Nice, tiny, compact. You wouldn't believe that it can just about perfectly replicate dozens of retro systems, but it does.
But it does.
So let me get into the MISTer Wiki real quick.
Okay.
And I just want to tell everyone about the cores that it supports right now.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable how many.
So this is from the wiki page. I don't know how complete this is, but I'm just going to read them off. The Bally Astrocade, the Atari 2600 and 5200, the ColecoVision, the NES, the Game Boy, the Odyssey 2, PC Engine and TurboGrafx, the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive, Sega Master System and Game Gear, which I think would also include the SG-1000, right?
Yep, you do have an SG-1000 in there too.
The SNES / Super Famicom, the Vectrex, the Amstrad, the SNES is listed twice.
Sega CD,
which is not in here, so this list must be old. Atari 800, Amiga, Commodore 64, and it, as George mentioned, Neo Geo, which is a newer core. A bunch of retro computers, which is really cool. It emulates almost, I don't know how perfectly, but the core status is Superstar, which means it's just about perfect. It perfectly emulates a 486 computer, so you can load in like MS-DOS or Windows 95 VHDs and full keyboard support. And one of the really, really cool things, which kind of blew my mind, was when I learned that they're also these awesome people out there are also mapping arcade boards into MISTer. So MAME is actually wildly inaccurate. It's awesome. I mean, I think we've all been using MAME for 20 years, and it's amazing. And this is no knock against MAME.
Yeah, it has its place, and it's definitely great.
But
if you want accuracy, you're gonna get it here.
Right. So obviously, those are done in they're done by a board by board basis or a system. Like there was one developer who recently came out with, and I think is still perfecting, a CPS1 core. But now there's a whole bunch of CPS1 games available. Final Fight was the first thing that I loaded up. Let me see if this works, And there's also there's a there's a Sony PS1 core in development. I know some guys working on that. There are a bunch of other arcade boards that are out there. Really, really cool stuff. I mean, basically, the closest. It's arcade perfect. So it's the closest. If you were to put side by side between arcade hardware, this would come just about perfect. And MAME, I think
you can actually, people have done this where you take side by side comparisons of a real arcade board or a real arcade machine and MISTer, and if you power them on, the only difference in timing is the delay in which one was turned on first. You can run them for hours, and the timing difference will just stay constant. So if one was training on how to do like speed runs of games or trying to increase high scores, playing on a MISTer would be no different from playing from like a real arcade or a real console.
There have been discussions on people who building MAME machines, arcade cabs or bar top cabs. Should I use a MISTer instead of a Raspberry Pi or a Windows PC? And I mean, look, the answer is different for everybody. It's whatever you want to do. There's no right or wrong answer.
Absolutely.
But you don't get the variety that you get with MAME right now because this is so accurate. The work has to be done to program each board and chip into MISTer, and there's not a ton. There's a bunch of really, really good stuff, but it's not you're not going to get thousands.
It's just a fraction.
Right, it's just a fraction.
Yeah. But that's going to change with time. Like the more proprietary chips get decapped and reversed, and the more cores that get made, it builds up on itself. Like you can see that with the CPS1 games, where once one game is completely reversed and broken down and turned into a core, it makes creating cores for the other games that much easier. So with time, I think that this will fill out and be very comparable to MAME. So it's like you said, it's a trade-off between number of games versus an accurate experience.
Right. And one super cool thing that I read, there's a great article on, I think, Racket Boy, which talks all about this stuff, and there's a YouTuber named Smokemonster who that's how I first kind of really got into this. He did something over the holidays he did like a different thing on MISTer a day, so that got me super into it. That's when I started talking about George. You're like, hey man, you want to check this thing out? But in that article they mentioned something like, let's just say one guy is doing Neo Geo, and it uses a certain and I'm pulling this out of my hiney here, so none of this is real. Like a Toshiba audio chip, right? So they map that chip as part of everything. Okay, great. So then someone starts doing another console, and if he uses the same chip, well, that's already been, documented and everything. So they don't have to they can just pull that information out, stick it into what they're doing, and and it, like you said, it builds on itself.
Like the best example of this is the Sharp, the 68,000, the Motorola 68,000 chip. Once that got fully reversed and created into a core, it opened up, let's see, like the Genesis, like plenty of computers, like so many systems, or like the Yamaha sound chips that are prevalent in pinball and arcades and the Genesis. Like once those got turned into cores, huge development.
Yeah. All bets are off now. I had a note here to talk about, Johnny Retro Gamer, who would say, well, I could just load up a ROM in Nestopia in Windows and play it, and what the heck's the difference? There's no wrong way to play video games. Like if you the only thing that I think matters is do you have fun, right?
Right.
So like, there's nothing wrong with emulators on PCs or Raspberry Pis. I mean, I've used a Raspberry Pi. I just like the lag timing and everything. Like I feel like I'm sensitive to it, and it just makes me enjoy it less. For somebody like me, and obviously we are deep in the waters here on like what we do.
You and I are far gone.
We're not normal human beings anymore.
No.
But and like I went into this thing with speculation. I spent a couple $100 on it. I got it. I was like, let's see. I don't know, and I set it all up, and I'm a tinkerer. I like to tinker a little bit. I was surprised at how little tinkering I needed to do. This was very straightforward as far as like 0 to playing.
It is.
And there was one setting, so I loaded up, my test games, which were Super Mario World, Super Mario Brothers, to feel how the controller feels and everything. And there was a little like, I felt like there was a little bit of lag, and then there was one setting I changed in the video options. After that, it was like perfect. And I was absolutely blown away. So like, there's nothing, like if you are interested in completely accurate hardware without having to shell out, I don't know, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars on original consoles,
if you include the arcades,
right? And then modifying them for HDMI output and this and that. I also love this thing because it's open source, so there's a real like solid community behind it. And there's nothing wrong with commercial products. Like Analog stuff is beautiful. They make like really, really nice. In my opinion, they sell their consoles for around $200. Totally worth it.
And they're worth it.
Beautiful. Build quality is fantastic. But this is kind of you're not getting the polish that you're getting with this, and there's a lot more tinkering. You gotta, maybe this doesn't work, you gotta figure out what's wrong on the SD card or something.
Right, but you're definitely getting the same level of quality in terms of accuracy and experience.
Absolutely.
So I would say too that it really depends on what your goal is with gaming. Like if you're a speedrunner, then no, you shouldn't be using emulation. You're not going to get that kind of perfect timing, and all of your training isn't going to translate when you play on a real NES or whatever. Like imagine playing Battletoads like on an emulator. Like I couldn't beat Battletoads on an emulator, but I can with MISTer. I can with a real console. As an example.
I don't know if I could beat it, period. But so before we get to the actual demo of the device and show everybody what it looks like, how it works, which is probably everyone's like, hey, it's what I really want to see, guys. Let's talk about one more, maybe a little dry topic, but I think it's one of the most important. What does this mean for retro gaming preservation? Because like software emulators are great, and ROM dumping is great because we get backups of the files and they're not going to be lost. But I mean, if you think of games as like an art form, right? Like like a record, like a musical artist makes a record. So when you would play that back, let's just say there was a huge, say an original Beatles record from from the 60s, and you're gonna play that back on like a really terrible record player these days that's gonna make it sound like absolute hell, or do you want your sound quality, or do you want to experience it the way it was meant to be experienced?
Right.
So, emulators are great, but as we said, they're not accurate, and these systems are not going to be around forever. They're old hardware. I mean,
as much as I try to keep them alive.
George does his part too, let me tell you guys. He's probably responsible for like half of the retro systems on Long Island working. But and funnily enough, it seems like some of the older stuff is the most indestructible, like an NES and like an N64. You could throw at a plane, it'd still work. And if you breathe on a PS2 wrong, it'll stop working. But
totally.
But so by doing this, by people mapping out the actual hardware and essentially recreating it in a virtual environment, for any IT people out there, I kind of thought of this before as we were describing FPGA. An FPGA is kind of like a virtual machine where, you install like a VM, on a virtual host and you have a virtual server or computer running, for all intents and purposes, it's like a physical computer. You access it, you can over the network, whatever. It's operating just like it was physically there, but it's running inside of something else. That's kind of what this is doing. So by mapping out all of this stuff, it is preserving these systems in a way that I think can't be done otherwise, because the only other option we have is to manufacture new systems,
new hardware,
with chips that probably aren't even made anymore, right?
Yeah, and honestly, it'd be chips that can be directly derived from this project.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually another. If anybody wanted to manufacture new stuff, they could take that information out of these cores and probably do it, which is really a wild idea. But it just is. All this good stuff just comes from it. So, George, you entertain the folks for a second while I plug this thing in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to follow up on what you were saying regarding preservation. Like, in 200 years, 300 years, I don't care how hard people try to preserve these systems, they're not going to last forever. And so if we have a method of preserving them in a hardware accurate manner, it means that people far into the future can experience these things the way that they were intended to be experienced. And I think that's one of the best things about Mister and FPGA gaming in general. And I think that the future is bright with this too. Like right now, things are very, heavily developed on the DE10 Nano, but as FPGAs get more complex and more inexpensive, then this is going to migrate out to other platforms, and you'll see things like, 64-bit systems, like Jaguar being turned into a core, and so there's a lot more in store for this in the years to come for sure.
That is, I can't wait to see what happens next. And side note, I am really, really disappointed I do not have a CRT right now, because I am fiending to plug this thing into a CRT and have some fun. And
I, thankfully, this was not related at all, but a friend of mine 2 or 3 days ago just dropped off this beautiful 1998 NEC multi-sync monitor that can do 15 kilohertz and 31 kilohertz, and it plays perfectly with Mister. So I've been enjoying playing it both in RGB and in HDMI, and it's just absolutely glorious. I'm sorry.
I had a PVM a while ago, and I got rid of it because I live in a very small place. But I'm really kicking myself in the ass for that one. All right, so this is the... Oh, you can't see this, George, can you?
I can't. No. But can the
audience can.
Good.
I mean, if you wanted to bring up the Twitch page and mute the sound, it might be a little bit of a delay, but I think you could kind of follow along.
Yeah, let me take a look.
And I will look at the chat real quick. Kat's here. Hey, Kat. Terry's here. The Terry Taylor Show. Ryan's here.
Nice. Hey, guys.
Hey, guys. How you doing? We're gonna...
Oh, yeah. I see everything now.
Okay, cool.
Great.
We're going to be taking a... We're going to be doing a Q&A after the demo, too. So if anyone has any questions about this, we'll be able to tell you. So I do have... So I have a little USB Wi-Fi unit module in here. I also have a Bluetooth adapter. You're obviously not going to get the same controller latency with a Bluetooth pairing as you do with a direct USB, but just for the sake of ease, that's what I have right now. So this is just the main screen, nothing flashy. If you guys look at the top, those little icons, the first is telling you that it's connected to Wi-Fi. The second is Bluetooth, and the third means that there's a RAM expansion plugged in, which, like we said, you need for some of the more advanced cores like Neo Geo and stuff. So, just going into console, right? I mean, let's just go into NES, right?
Sure.
And I think this one's programmed to have Super Mario Brothers just come up.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So I have some really awesome scanlines. So the scanline filters in this are absolutely amazing. I've never been a huge fan of scanline filters on HDMI because it's like, why are you trying to just... It always seemed like it caused more complications, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How do they look? Because on my screen they look kind of crappy, but they look beautiful live.
Yeah, it's pretty common during captures that they don't come out, and right now they don't look great on the capture, but that's pretty normal. I can tell you too that in real life they look outstanding, and I can also tell you a little bit more about the guy who developed them. His name is Sultan G42, and the way that these work is almost more like a shader than like scanline. So they're always as long as you turn the interpolation on, so that it's like yeah, I wish. Okay, you've got that on. Yeah, so if you go into that menu, Joel, and you take a look, you can see that there's like so many different options, and there are options for different consoles. There are also options for if you're playing handhelds like Game Boy Color and Game Boy. So and they're extremely good. And there's also some systems like, say for example, Donkey Kong, the arcade, which is a vertical monitor orientation. You can create vertical scan lines for systems like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about these scan lines, and like I said, I'm an idiot, and I'm not somebody who knows a lot about this, but I have played with a bunch of different systems and emulators over the years, and a lot of times I can't tell the difference between them, and I feel like all of these I can tell. And
yeah, you can see the difference.
And it's kind of easy to find like what you're looking for. Like it's pretty easy to be like, okay, I like this. So this is with it off, then it's not capturing super well. So this is the menu. I'm using an 8-bit Do SM30 Pro controller. I'll show everybody this is what I'm using. So I just mapped this button right here to the menu, and not Perfect. A ton of options, but disk swap is for Famicom Disk System. So Correct. If you want to load a game, you just go to load, and then this is stuff on your SD cards. This is everything that I have. I have a lot of stuff on here. So you just pick the game that you want to play. I'll play some Gauntlet 2. Hit it.
There you go.
And you're playing Gauntlet 2.
What's really nice about the NES core in particular is that it gives you functionality that a North American Nintendo never had. So Japanese Famicoms, they have expansion audio capability, and so there are certain games that have really rich extra audio that American games don't, and so this core gives you that access, and so you can find like English translated versions of that, like say Castlevania 3 is a great example, and you get that expansion audio, and it just sounds way better than what we got here in the United States.
Yeah, I don't think the audio output is working right now, and
no.
I didn't test that in the hour preceding this, so sorry guys. If we ever do this again, I will definitely have the audio up and working. So let's just say that you're like, all right, I want to play something else. There's only 3 pages here. There's the left page, which just gives you your internet information and volume. This is the main screen that we were on. And these are some core specific options, and this is where you can define your buttons. So MISTer lets you on the main screen just map your controller. It's the easiest mapping I've ever seen in my life, and it auto maps that to everything else. So you do it once, and it just, for the most part, it just works. But if you want to remap keys for specific cores, you can do that inside of the cores. So this is where you would remap your buttons there. You can go here to just reboot, and here we are back. CPS1. So we mentioned that the CPS1 core is fairly new. I have played
but it is unbelievable how good this
so
is,
good.
Isn't it?
I'm not going to embarrass myself and put Street Fighter on. Somebody said, Ryan said. But I will just we'll do a quick final fight here.
Do some final fight, yeah. It also has the 30th anniversary hack, which lets 3 people play simultaneously, which is so cool. I can't wait to do that.
Now, how does multi-controllers work? I haven't really gotten into that.
I mean, it's pretty simple. You just plug them in, and the mapping is consistent across all of the controllers. So, yeah, it I think it knows the difference between player 1 and player 2. I don't know. I've played some 2-player Final Fight with my son, and
it
was
worked.
fine.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it just worked. Yeah. the guy who works on these CPS-1 cores, his name is Jotego, and he's located in Spain. And yeah, so we got access to this because I'm a patron of his work. So I think all you got to do is pay something like, I pay like $7 a month, and then I get access to all of his beta cores like this. And he gets the real hardware. He logic probes every chip. He's not doing the reverse engineering of all the chips, but that's not necessary to create an extremely accurate core, which is what he's done here with CPS-1. And I mean, these are betas this is a beta thing that you're playing right now, and it does not look or
it
feel
does not
beta
feel beta at all. It feels it feels perfect. That's the thing when I've been playing this thing over the past I guess it's been about a week now.
Yep.
Everything just feels perfect.
Yeah, it does. There are all sorts of little quirks that if you know a game well, like Street Fighter, like I know that game actually pretty damn well, and there are some glitches that you can pull off with Guile in the original Street Fighter World Warrior, and those are there. You can do those with this CPS-1 core. With emulators, that's not really possible. So like all of the minutia that if you know a game well and if you've played it on real hardware, you know these things exist, and you can replicate that here.
Ryan asks, is this really the first time we can play arcade accurate ROMs at home sans emulation? And I think the answer is yes.
Yes, it is.
It's so impressive. I mean, that's the thing that keeps it's so impressive.
In my case too, I own a Street Fighter World Warrior arcade board, and I have a minigun, so I can play that at home. And I have, in fact, played this side by side with my real arcade board, and you cannot tell which one you're playing from at all.
How about that, guys? Huh? All right,
You're kicking butt. I wish I could be on this too, playing as Hagar.
Yeah,
That's
right.
my favorite for this game.
Yeah, this game, I really I played a little bit as a kid, but when Final Fight Advance came out for the Game Boy Advance in like the late 90s, me and my friends played forever.
Yeah. Yes, Ryan. The FPGA does accurately recreate the timing. So yeah, games slow down. A great example of this is Double Dragon. So Double Dragon 1 and 2, the arcades, are really notorious for slowdown. Like as soon as you get 3 or more enemies on the screen, like you got to be prepared to actually the sooner you kill someone the better, because the game is going to play faster. And with these Double Dragon core, that's exactly what happens. And I actually own that arcade as well, so I can verify that too.
All right, so let's go back to the main menu here. So we went through CPS-1 here. So I wanted to kind of start. So this is the screen you see when you first turn it on. So you hit kind of the back button, and this is where you can remap your keyboard, your joystick settings, and you can access your scripts. So MISTer has an update script, right, which will go out to the internet and see if there's any new cores or any new system files, and just grab them. So we can do that real quick.
Yeah, it's very low maintenance that way.
Yes, very low maintenance. I have the screen a little bit cut off on the left, so you can't see the full thing, but you can see it going. And it's done. So there was one core that was updated. I can't see what it was, but that's it. And now we're back. And there's other scripts you can do. This was the script to pair the Bluetooth controller. I actually set up with this rclone thing. rclone saves upload. So I connected this to my Google Drive. So now I hit this, it'll connect to my Google Drive and upload my save games folder. So if the SD card decides to crap itself, my saves are protected. And as probably a primarily RPG gamer, that's the worst thing you want is a save to go away.
Oh yeah. I didn't get a chance to tell you this, Joel, but I successfully managed to dump saves from my original cartridges, put them on MISTer, and play them.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Let me see if there's any other scripts in here that are worth noting. No, these are the INI settings, which is where you change some of the stuff regarding what you're doing. If you want to get analog output, you might have to change a couple of things in here. You can set your resolution, audio output, stuff like that. I wonder, I'm not going to go exploring in here now, but this is just, I mean, it's a pretty easy way to edit. If for the less technical people, INI files are been around forever, and they're a way for different programs to like know their settings. So a lot of times you have to open up an INI file in like Notepad and like manually change ones to zeros and crap like that. It's just, it's a very easy, friendly way, or I think the friendliest way that something like this can be made.
Yeah, you can grab this INI also if you take the SD card out and look at it as well. You can do it it's pretty easy.
You can also set up FTP over your home network if you want to drag and drop files that way. I didn't, but you can. So this is George. So this is the arcade folder. I get that these are the arcade boards and ROMs that have been translated. Hey, Computer Space. I think we talked about that once.
That was the first thing I played. I had to.
So what are the folders up here like? Alternatives, Jotego.
Oh yeah, so alternatives are variations depending on region. Like, let's just say, I don't know, Centipede, like if you want to play the Japanese version or the European version, like that's what the alternatives area is for. Like if you really want to play the one specific to your geographic region, whereas these in here tend to be North America, or like there's global versions. That's what that is. Jotego is that developer that I was referring to earlier, who's done the Capcom CPS-1, and he's done a lot of the earlier Capcom games as well, and Double Dragon, as you can see. Ghosts and Goblins, which is outstanding. It is so perfect, and finding that game in the wild functioning is really hard these days. So that's a real treat if you want to try that out. One thing that's also cool about the arcade cores, which I forgot to mention to you as well, is that when you're using a real arcade board, there are dip switch settings that allow you to change certain things, like how many coins per play and level of difficulty and continues and all that kind of stuff. And these cores have that. So if you go through the options, you'll find actually over here you can see bonus life. That's a dip switch setting on a real PCB. So those things are all here as well.
Yeah, it's called difficulty. So I'll do this real quick and die.
Yes, it will not last long.
So Ryan's asking if you wanted to play Arkanoid, does this support a paddle?
Yes.
What, like a USB paddle, or like what?
Yeah, it would be a USB paddle. I think, well, there are, and maybe you'll be able to talk about this later, Joel, about how you could potentially use real controllers and not USB on MISTer as well, and there are devices intended for that. That interface with. Yeah, that was quick.
I expected nothing less. Yeah.
I just Ryan's question reminded me of something else too. MISTer allows you to play light gun games very easly on a modern LCD, which is awesome. You can't really do that any other way. So it has support for the mouse, and it even gives you like a target reticle as an overlay on top of games, so you can play Duck Hunt with a mouse, and I think light guns are also compatible with CRTs as well. I haven't tried that yet because I don't have the hardware to do it, but I know it's supposed to be possible.
So I just went to the computers folder, so just to show everyone an example here, I'll boot up the Apple II.
Yeah, that's great. Let's play some Oregon Trail.
So a lot of times when you load a core, you may not even know that you loaded it because it might be a black screen, but then you load your...
Yeah.
So we're going to mount a disk here, so we'll go into Games. Let's go down to Oregon Trail, which is, I guess we can call it the official PC game of the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo, because it's all anybody wants to play.
It is.
Here we go, Oregon Trail, Side A. So those of us of a certain age will remember this screen.
Oh, yeah.
Enter? What do I do?
It might be loading. It has the accurate load times too.
All right, so I mean, we're
for better or for worse.
we are doing it, right?
Yeah.
Something else that's cool too. I will show off, and I really haven't messed with this yet, but there is a 486 in here, right? So, all right, so it loads with nothing in here, but I'm going to mount a Windows 95 VHD and reset.
Yeah, I was thoroughly pleased to be reinstalling Windows 95 on this machine.
Never thought I'd be doing this ever again.
Yeah, me too. Oh, that was so much fun to do. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this.
And I actually, I don't know what's going to happen because I just checked to make sure that the screen would come up, and then I reset in my quick prep this morning.
Okay.
I haven't. So this doesn't have any games in it, right? You have to load in.
Yeah,
You have to.
it's just it's empty.
So you can, I guess, get the disk images and install the games. Is that how you?
Exactly, just like you would as if it was a real Windows 95 machine.
That's cool. And like it,
Yep.
this has full mouse and keyboard support. So I'm gonna load up like old SimCity on this, I think.
Yes, you can.
Um,
Play Lemmings, you name it.
yeah, Ryan brings up a good point. Why don't you just use VMware? That is true, and probably the PCs are less impactful on the MISTer than the consoles are.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
it's still pretty cool to have, and if you kind of looking at this as your, as close to an all-in-one retro gaming console as possible, your mouse and keyboard works as well on this as it does in VMware. So, this kind of has like the it just works aspect of it.
That's true.
So we'll go back and so we'll show everyone quickly the. We'll go through the computer list just to show people want to see what's in here.
The Amiga is pretty damn awesome. If you haven't messed with
I
that.
have not.
Oh, the Amiga is incredible. But it needs some tweaking to get like.
Right.
If you haven't done it yet, we can do something else.
Yeah, no, I haven't. The Sharp X68000 is in here, but it's not ready yet, right? The core is.
Yeah, I've not been able to get it to work, but
they're still working on that.
Yeah. It's a matter of
consoles. There are. I know I ran through a list before, but there are definitely more here than I brought up.
That AY one is a Pong console.
Really, that's cool.
Like, yeah, that's home Pong.
That's
yeah.
So cool.
Should show you, yeah, like maybe Neo Geo, because I think that's really, really remarkable how good that is.
Someone give me a Neo Geo game to play.
Well,
come on, audience.
All right. Well, we could do Fatal Fury is great. King of Fighters is great. Metal Slug.
Yeah, we'll do Metal Slug. Everyone knows Metal Slug.
Oh, Windjammers. All right.
There we go.
There it is. It runs like as if it's got a modded BIOS too, which is cool.
Yeah, I think you had to put in like 5 different BIOSes in the folder to have it like
behave properly.
Yeah, I don't even think I know how to play this game, so this is going to be interesting.
I mean, the cost of MISTer versus the cost of having a Neo Geo library, it's not even close, man.
I think even the flash card will cost you more than the whole.
Oh yeah, flash card is like $700-800. So you could buy 2 or 3 MISTers for that. So yeah, this core is so good, you could, like we were saying before, make replacement chips with it. It's incredibly accurate.
Yeah, Terry said that this looks better than the Mini. So don't forget the Mini is just a it's a very low end. The mini systems, while they're great, like nothing against them, they're fantastic. They're aesthetically pleasing. They're cheap. They're low end emulation devices. So like, you're not getting any type of, while the emulation is good, it's still emulation, right? So, yeah, I would advise someone who has like a modicum of interest and like a little bit of like technical ability. You can get, for the price of for those retro systems, you could get this thing just about fully loaded, and
Yep.
And if you're into this stuff like we are, it's kind of like a no-brainer.
Yeah. The portability of Mister is also pretty nice too. Like, when things ever go back to normal and I'm traveling again, this thing is coming with me every time.
Yeah, George travels all over the world for his job, so he's stuck probably in a lot of hotel rooms all over.
Yeah.
So, cool thing here. Another cool thing I saw. I was playing around with this the other day. So for SNES, I was able to load up some of the Satellaview stuff, and like the Zelda 1 remake that they made, that was broadcast over the Satellaview. I think this was it. Let's see.
Yeah, there it is.
Oops.
And it's English translated too,
Yeah.
so you can.
And you could put in my name here. You could play your normal like ROM hacks, translations, and everything. You can put them in. I know you can do that on just about anything, but I've always wanted to play. I guess this is the reimagining or something.
Yeah, this is like an SNES reimagining of the original NES classic.
Yeah, I love the. This is probably my favorite game of all time. So this map is different though. Maybe this is a. Yeah, this is. I guess this is like a. Maybe it's a. Kind of like a second quest type. Like the map's old. I picked the wrong ROM. Are there any platforms they can't do? So the Mister is limited to it only has a certain amount of processing power. So I have read that theoretically it can probably do PS1, and like there is someone working on a PS1 core. But like other than that, that's probably where we hit the limit. I don't know if Saturn is even possible because of how complicated the Saturn is.
For now, but all of what you're saying is for now. When more complex FPGAs are created and when more cores are developed, it's just a matter of time. But with the Mister, I would say 32-bit systems are going to be the limit.
Right, and let's not forget, like as we said earlier in the show here, a new board comes out that everyone wants to standardize on, a new FPGA. It's not like all this work gets lost; it just gets transferred over, like because it all uses the same language and the same, probably a couple tweaks, and then boom, you're good to go.
Yeah. A lot of these cores, a lot of this work came from MIST. Some of it comes from even before MIST. I think the oldest core on here is the Amiga, which is maybe 15 years old. It's unbelievable.
And that's where a lot of these computers probably came from, was the MIST project.
A fair amount of them.
Is there any other like consoles you guys want to?
Oh, we should take a look at the Genesis real quick, because there's just to show a couple of options that you have on there, which are pretty amazing, that I don't think any other FPGA can do, or certainly not a real Genesis.
Sure.
So if you go through and look down, and my display is lagged compared to yours, so I'm just going to do my best here. But you can do things like, you see that option Composite Blending over there? So what that does is it creates an effect that certain games have that's only available on composite video. Like Sonic is a good example of this. Like the waterfalls are supposed to have this kind of transparency effect, and that's only viewable in composite video. But with Mister, you can actually get that over HDMI, which is really cool.
Do you know which Sonic game?
The original Sonic. Yeah. And people are very picky about Genesis sound. Some people really like the first Yamaha chip, and other people are really passionate about the one that came out with like the Model 2. And on the fly, you can toggle between those Yamaha chips in Mister. And so, and it can be argued too that some games sound better with older chip and some sound better with the newer chip. And so, on a per game basis, you can tweak that as you want.
Just trying to get to a waterfall, see if we can see the difference. I'm also playing this through OBS. I don't have the external display on, so I'm playing like horribly delayed.
Yeah, I can see that, but that's all right. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I noticed I saw the option that you could change the sound chip, and I thought that was amazing. What a piece of like attention to detail, you know?
Yeah, they really thought through a lot of things with each of these cores. And they're not static either. Like as you saw, like every couple of days there's something new.
Yeah, a lot of development. I don't know where the waterfall is, but
oh, what the heck? Where did it go?
I passed it.
Oh, dude.
See, this is why I can't talk and do something. I can't pat my head, rub my belly at the same time. So just.
But yeah.
Yeah. So here's the FM Hi-Fi PCM. I don't even know what that means.
That has to do with it's more sound options. I forgot exactly what it is too.
So what are the options to change the sound chips here? Okay, so you can.
So there's only 2 chips. So if you the 26
the 2 good ones, I hope.
Is the original. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you can also do things that are nice that original hardware can't do. So like for example, like the NES has sprite limitations, and so like you could take a game like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where there's too many enemies on the screen and you get all this sprite flicker. You can do things to the MISTer core to give it more, more juice and basically eliminate that sprite flicker. So it's like so nice, all these ways you can dial in and fine tune everything to the way that you want it to be.
Are there any cores that anybody wants to see while we have this up here? I've been playing Game Boy Advance a lot on this.
Yeah, it's good for that. Some Advance Wars.
Yeah. Nope, nobody? Alright. Coleco. I think Coleco.
I would say maybe the one thing where I'm a little disappointed is the vector-based games like Asteroids and the Vectrex, but not because of MISTer, but just because a raster monitor is never going to give you that kind
vector
of look that a
right.
vector monitor. Yeah, that's not a fault of MISTer. It's just a fault of the display,
All right, we'll do a little Q&A now. I know you guys have been asking questions as we have gone along here, but any questions at all about this thing or about games? Load up the Zelda. Is it Legend of Zelda? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awakening, the color version.
There you go. It's about like 300-ish, right, Joel?
So the Thoracic board goes for about 130, I think. Hang on one sec. I will tell you because.
And a person can just start with the Thoracic board. You don't have to buy anything else, and you'll get a lot of functionality just with that. It's really if you want the full experience.
So going on MISTerAddons, which is a popular site to get this stuff, the Thoracic Nano board is 150. The extra RAM expansion is 60. The I/O board, which is the board on top that gives you the analog out and the analog audio and everything, is 50. This guy is selling a case for 50. The USB hub is 40. Quick sidebar here: if any of the guys I know from the expo are going to get one of these, I bought a USB board and I'm not going to need it. So if you guys get this, let me know because I'm not going to need my USB board. And let's talk about why I'm not going to need my USB board. So there is this very nice man. I forget what his name is. Might be Sean, but it might not be. Who I've been aware of and kind of worked with a little bit for almost the past 10 years. He makes this thing called BlissBox, which has always been a project to use original controllers on computers or other systems, or platform agnostic, any controller use. He actually custom built me some. I had these boxes to fit inside of a CD drive on a PC. I had 2 of them made, each with like 6 different controller ports or different consoles in like 2011. And I kept mailing them back and forth to him because I needed like a reset button put in. So I was trying to make like the ultimate, my ultimate emulation machine back then. Yeah, Ryan, if you go to MISTerAddons, you can build a bundle. You could just like boom, right?
Yeah.
So BlissBox is making a board, a USB hub, like the USB hub that you can get, called the Blister. Mr. Blister, got it? So the difference between the Blister and the standard USB board is that the Blister comes with 2 BlissBox controller ports, which are actually use the HDMI port, which is kind of crazy. But so how the BlissBox works, if you went and bought one, like he sells something called the 4Play, which is like a box with 4 HDMI ports around it, and then you can buy different cables to hook up different original controllers. You can buy a cable that's the HDMI port to NES controller, the HDMI port, which is not video, it just uses the HDMI for the data transfer, the port to a Coleco, to the Genesis, and what is it, the DB9 port? Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
which is
DB9.
like a bunch of things use. So there are 2 of those ports on the on this Blister add-on board. And where it really gets crazy, and this is something I don't know a ton about, but I've been reading and trying to learn. So the whole idea of why this Blister board is attractive for people and why it has a lot of opportunity here is because there's something called a low-level API. So this board essentially means that those special like BlissBox ports can talk directly to the core that's running the system, bypassing everything else. Like how it goes now is there's the USB port, and the USB port connects to the other board, and then the original board connects to the core, and there's like, it goes through a couple hoops.
There's overhead.
Right, it's overhead. So this low-level API lets it talk directly to the core, so it bypasses all that stuff. So you're already very low lag, like basically turns into like
really
impossible
low lag.
and like non-existent lag.
Yeah.
And it's they're actually not even out yet. I pre-ordered one. It's supposed to be shipping around the end of the month. And that's also why I don't have my case on yet, because my case is built for the Blister board and the ports don't line up with the existing USB board that I have. So I opted for that because I'm a lunatic, and like I said, like I had this SN30 plugged in directly through USB, and it seemed perfect. Like I could not find lag. I looked for it. I could not find it. With my amateur eye or hands, right? Because I'm trying to feel it. Okay, Ryan says, if the analog projects are FPGA based, what's to say I just can't reprogram those to run other platforms?
Well, that's already happened to some extent.
To some extent. MISTer actually added, I think, on their NT Mini, which was their super high priced NES. I think that they let you run other ROMs on that. Is that true, George?
So some people developed custom firmware for those FPGAs that allow some open source cores to run on them. It's not nearly as wide-ranging as what MISTer can do, and I think that has to do with the FPGA cores inside of the analog products. They're not as powerful as the Tarasic DE10 Nano, I believe.
Let's not forget, too, that the analog are commercial products, and they're locked down, in a fashion. Again, like, no knocks against that. I love analog. I love their products, and I really hope they continue to make, like their new handheld whenever it's coming out. Man, that thing looks like
that pocket. Yeah.
So the MISTer FP, the whole MISTer project, everything about it is open source, completely. Like all the software, the hardware uses the Tarasic DE10 Nano as like because there has to be some standard in the hardware, but I believe the board, like the add-on boards, are all
Open source
source. Like different people make them because they can. Everything about it is open source, which is neat as hell.
Yeah. I mean, in our case, we had MISTerAddons build these, but I have built one of these from scratch for people too, where I order the PCBs, buy all the components from DigiKey, solder it all on, and it's doable.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's kind of everything that we had. If anybody wants to see any core, any game, any options, just let us know down there in the chat. We'd be happy to talk about it and or show you. Give a sec just in case someone's typing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of to wrap up here. I love this thing. I own just about all this stuff when it comes out. I have all the analog stuff, which I love. I have the mini systems. This was the first one that kind of got me excited, and maybe because I had to tinker with it a little bit, maybe because there's so much inside of it, and maybe because like even though you have to tinker a little bit just to get it going, and I don't want anybody to be put off by that. It is very, very easy to get going.
Yeah.
I don't. It's just like there's just so much for it to offer, and then if you add in the fact that like by being involved in this, and like let's just say you contribute to someone's Patreon who's working on a core or something, which you don't have to do. They're doing it anyway, but there are a lot of people working extremely hard getting this stuff to work. It's also like furthering the preservation aspect and furthering keeping this stuff for future generations, accurately and completely, which I think is just as important as as having the ROMs, the ROMs dumped.
And enjoying it. Yeah, it's that hardware preservation and accuracy that is really special about this. Yeah. I mean, for me, like I started just by building this for somebody else, and then when it was done, I was like, I need this. I have to have this.
When I first so in the when I post this to YouTube, I'll put links to Smokemonster's channel, which he's done a bunch of things on this. That Racket Boy article I mentioned, the MISTer GitHub project, and some resources to learn more about it. MISTerAddons as well. So Ryan's asking here, biggest question I have would be glitches. I know how to force a power reset in Street Fighter, which I imagine is due to a short circuit on the board somewhere. What would happen if I performed that scenario in the Fpga?
It should do the same thing, as long as it's not like a mechanical thing, like if you're like shaking the arcade to create a reset, because that's physical. But if it's a software-based glitch, it should be reproducible. I mean, I already know some of those software glitches. In Street Fighter in particular, I did reproduce a software glitch that I know is specific to the arcade. So yeah, it should work as long as the core is accurate enough, which I believe this one is.
So as long as you don't get a Fonzie hit it.
Yeah, exactly. That's not going to work.
All right, guys. See if there's anything else. Kind of don't have anything else to talk about, but
I feel like we kind of covered all the big stuff. I mean, other than just playing games.
Yeah. But I'm also not leaving the house too much these days, so
you got plenty of time.
I got a lot of stuff to do.
Robotron. I just fixed Robotron for the museum like a few days before it closed. That was so anticlimactic, so at least you can play it here.
Yeah, I played this game for the first time kind of recently in the past couple of years. I went to Barcade for my birthday a bunch of years ago, and
it's really quite fun.
I wish I had two sticks though.
Yeah. Yeah, it's better with two sticks, but still.
So I don't know if we fully answered the question because I don't remember, but regarding original controllers, with that Bliss box or that Blister add-on, you can theoretically use any original controllers from the system, paddles, weird controllers. One of the big arguments for having something like Blister was I can't play this and talk at the same time.
No.
Was like okay, like crazy controllers like the like the Jaguar controller or the was it the Coleco?
The Coleco's a great example because it's a telephone with a few extra.
Right. So like, how are you going to map that to an SN30? The answer is you're not. But if you have one that you can plug in and just and map the buttons, then you're good. Which I think is that's really why I got one. It wasn't the no lag promises, of course, got me a little excited, but having the potential ability to hook up all original stuff, because that's part of like we're talking about accuracy and playing it the way it's supposed to be played. Part of that is using some original controllers as well.
One can do this to some extent as well for arcade. So I do know a guy who is hardcore with Donkey Kong, and that uses leaf switch joysticks, and he rigged up his own panel with leaf switch joysticks to go into his MISTer, and he plays it like that with the same kind of spacing and feel as a real Donkey Kong cabinet.
That's cool.
So yeah, you can do that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, those trackballs.
That's true. I modded an arcade 1-up machine, and I got the spinner it came with was not the highest quality, so I got a replacement. But in MAME, I still couldn't get that spinner for Tempest and Arkanoid. It's really hard to get it just right.
With this though, it should be possible. I really hope they get Tempest on here. That would be awesome.
That would be really cool. I love the Williams this color flat. That Williams. I grew up
that aesthetic.
I grew up with a Stargate in my basement, so
nice.
Yeah, I grew up seeing this kind of weird color, trippy, wild thing,
kind of glow thing. And I can also tell you from a technical standpoint, keeping Williams games going is hard.
Yes.
They are very fragile. They go bad so often and so easily. Yeah.
I know that Seamus from the museum, when he was working on a bunch of the arcade machines, at some point in the past couple of years, he actually got in touch with the guy who programmed or made one of the Williams games. I don't know if it was Defender or Stargate or something. And the guy basically told them, look, these were not made to last this long. They were made to go make some money, then they were gonna crap the bed and die.
Right.
Because I think Seamus kept putting a certain board in it, it kept blowing. This one part of the board kept blowing.
I think it was Defender.
And it's just because they just weren't made. Because no one was thinking about oh, this is an important piece of history. We got to keep this alive for the next 40 years. No, they're
no.
We got to get this into arcade, make some money because arcade was the business, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's see. Ryan's asking, can it recreate a transparent screen overlay?
Maybe, but I don't think that's been done yet. Can't be sure.
There you go, Ryan.
I mean, it does do the scan lines that it does are basically an overlay already, so probably wouldn't be surprising.
I can't express how nice looking the scan lines are. I really wish they would come through on the stream. You got to see it to believe it. It is it's perfect. It's perfect.
They look better than they do on my HDMI modded NES, and yours too. Yeah, they look really good.
So Star Castle.
Let's see if it's there.
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Tron is, though. Discs of Tron is in here, too. If Terry's still here. Obviously, it's a much different experience than standing inside of the awesome cabinet, but it's in here.
That's cool.
All right, guys. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us on this demo and discussion.
Yeah.
I can't wait to keep playing with this. Maybe in another couple months, if there's a bunch of additional development, we'll do like a part 2 of this, and we'll go through. We'll just kind of do like updates. In the meantime, if you are still interested in learning more about this, which I would assume most people watching this are, we will have different resources in the comments of the podcast and the YouTube page where you can buy some of the components, read some stuff about it, learn a little bit more about it. In the meantime, I'm gonna try to find a way to get a CRT up into this loft so I can hook this thing up to an analog display.
Awesome.
All right, George, thank you for doing this with us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't thank you enough. And I think that the live podcast first time went well, and hopefully we'll do it again soon. I think we got the time right now, so why not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, take it easy, everybody.
Bye, guys.